Oh, hey there. I was just playing some Hatsune Miku Project Diva on my PSP. But I was wondering, Project Diva only came out a little bit after the PlayStation 2, right? And since these things run on little tiny discs, wouldn't it be possible for a PS1 to handle this type of game? Now, surely you might be wondering, the PlayStation 1? Surely that console is too old, at nearly a decade older than the PSP's hardware. But it has some pretty impressive titles for that time, such as Final Fantasy VII and Gran Turismo, which showed off how much the hardware could be pushed. So could Project Diva be ported to the PS1? The PlayStation 1, a device which dominated the market as Sony's introduction into the video game market. As such, it had many limitations compared to its grandchild, the PSP. Let's break down those limitations a bit. The PS1's GPU was capable of rendering 3D graphics, but with limited polygon counts, lower resolution textures, and no built-in anti-aliasing. That's a big step down from the PSP, which could handle much more complex 3D models and higher quality textures. There's also the storage limits of the PS1. PSP UMDs can hold about 1.8 gigabytes of data, while the PS1 used normal CDs, which maxed out at 700 megabytes. This means that the PS1 version of the game would require using multiple discs, which would mean each disc could hold about 80 minutes of music at normal quality. Another limitation is save data limitation. Since the PlayStation 1 does not have any way to store music, and with only 1 megabyte of space on the memory card, you can forget about storing complex beat maps. So what could be done? There were a total of 77 songs in Project Diva, which includes the edit mode songs and DLC songs. Since online wasn't really accessible, and we know that edit mode isn't going to really be available either, we can assume that they would have been added to the base game instead of being downloadable. So the average song length is about 3.5 minutes, so combined together, the songs are equivalent to about 270 minutes of music, or about 3.4 discs of CD discs, um, if they were stored in a normal format. Now, you might point out that we probably will not be storing it this way, and that would be correct. We would be compressing it. We have to mix it up with other data. And if we use the way that the PSP game original is about 1.8 gigabytes, then it would take about 2.6 CDs worth of data to reach that 1.8 gigabytes. But the problems don't end there. Like mentioned before, the PlayStation 1 cannot handle complex 3D models and textures at a smooth 60 FPS, which is required for smooth rhythm gameplay. So that means that we would probably need to use video to emulate the same feel. This means some of the features would have to be cut or significantly altered. For example, the Miku's room game mode would probably have to be scaled down to a 2D experience or removed altogether, since the rendering of a fully 3D environment would likely be too much for the PlayStation 1's hardware. The problem we run into again is that the PlayStation 1 used a custom MDEC motion detector chip to decode and display video, which had limitations in terms of resolution and frame rate, which means the most the video can actually run at is around 15 to 30 FPS. This is fine though, because as long as we keep the overlay at 60 FPS, the gameplay won't be significantly altered. In this setup, the overlay for the beats could be rendered as sprites or polygons managed by the GPU. As long as the overlay graphics are not too complex, PlayStation should be able to keep the beat timing consistent at 60 frames per second. This approach would allow smooth gameplay for rhythm-based games, even if the background is a bit choppier. But now we need extra storage for that video. To estimate the storage, let's assume that the resolution that we're using is about 320 by 240. The frame rate is 24 FPS, pretty common for full motion video, and the compression is 20 to 1.
The color depth is 16-bit, and the length is about 3.5 minutes per video. The raw uncompressed size of a single frame would be about 153,600 bytes per frame. At 24 FPS, that would be about 3,686,400 bytes per second. For a 3.5 minute long song, which is which is not about, but is actually 210 seconds, that would be 773,280,000 bytes, or about 737 megabytes uncompressed. Now, if we use MJPEG compression at a 20:1 ratio, it would equal about 36.85 megabytes per video. So each song would take about 37 megabytes. For a game with around 77 songs, we can estimate the rough storage will be around 2.8 gigabytes, which means, assuming the 3D models took about half a gigabyte of the original game, we're looking about at 1.3 gigabytes of music and UI, 2.8 gigabytes of video to equal 4.1 gigabytes of storage, which would be equivalent to about 6 CDs. This would be an absolutely massive game on the shelves, or extremely compressed. Think crunchy JPEGs.
Now that we've seen how we would demake it, let's see how other rhythm games on the PlayStation 1 look like. For example, a popular rhythm game on the PS1 is Vib-Ribbon. This game uses a simple 3D wireframe model with a black background to fit completely inside the PlayStation 1's RAM so that you can swap out the disc for songs. The minimalist visuals and the straightforward gameplay design means that Vib-Ribbon could easily run on the PlayStation 1's minimal hardware without compromising the rhythm-based experience. Another well-known rhythm game from the PlayStation 1 era is Parappa the Rapper. This game used a distinctive 2D art style with paper-thin characters, cleverly sidestepping the limitations of 3D rendering on the PlayStation 1. By embracing a cartoonish aesthetic and simple animations, Parappa the Rapper could deliver an engaging rhythm gameplay without needing high-resolution textures or complex models. The game presentation focused on timing and button press sequences, with the visual style adding charm that required prowess, which is very similar to Project Diva. In contrast, while we're talking about Project Diva definitely depends more on its vibrant visuals and detailed character animation, which would be a struggle to fit in the PlayStation 1's memory with its rendering capabilities, while Parappa the Rapper and Vib-Ribbon kind of embraced their hardware constraints. A Project Diva demake would need to significantly scale down its presentation. This would involve using pre-rendered video backgrounds and lower frame rates, while keeping the beat maps itself at a 60 frame per second to make sure that the rhythm maintains smooth gameplay. So, while it might be technically possible to cram Project Diva onto the PS1, it would have been a large task for a Diva that hadn't hit the spotlight yet. Proof that sometimes limitations inspire creativity just as much as they constrain it.